Welcome to Simple Wonders, where I help you simplify home education so you can work wonders in your home. I'm Jessica, a homeschooling mom of 4 boys, here to guide you through the first steps of starting your homeschool journey. In this series, you'll learn how to get started, what you actually need to homeschool, and you'll develop real teaching skills, even if you've never taught a day in your life. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. Let's get started. Welcome back to my homeschool series. This is week 6, where I'm going to take you through how I do our family gather subjects, which are the subjects that we do as a family, obviously, and they're full of truth, beauty, and goodness. Now, I'm going to be talking about the tools that I talked about last week, the 3 instruments or teaching tools that are essential for you to know to be able to teach really well at home. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend going back and watching those first so that you know what I'm talking about when I go through each of these subjects with you and briefly talk about how to teach them at home. So I mentioned that Family Gather is the time when we come together as a family and we study the content-based subjects. Now, content-based subjects are just that. They're the subjects that are mainly based on the content. You don't have to build a foundation of skills on top of each other, kind of like a pyramid going up to the top, which is the most advanced skills. It's because you can just study the Revolutionary War as a family, and the youngest kids will take in some of the easier stories for them to understand. The older kids can take in more complex themes from that same time period, so you can study as a family. Now, there's also skill-based subjects like math and phonics, music, and those I'm going to talk about next week. Right now, I'm just talking about the content-based subjects that we study as a family. I'm going to go through our week. So if you haven't printed this off, this is our Family Gather schedule for the week, and this is in week 4. So this is in the PDF that I gave you with the different schedules for you to print off and make your own. This is the Family Gather schedule that I gave you as an example or to use for yourself. I would recommend having that ready so that you can go through with each of the subjects, and I'll talk about how I teach them. So instead of teaching a lesson for every subject with each child, for example, if each of my children had history lesson, one child is studying ancient history, the other child is studying American history or of a certain time period, another child is studying Western Civ, and then I have to teach a lesson for each of those for each child, I would get completely burnt out within a week. I don't do it that way. I teach family style, which means that we are studying the same topics or time periods. So for history, may it be studying the Revolutionary War. My older kids will be reading a more advanced book for them. My younger kids will be reading a less advanced book that's just really highlighting the stories. And then once a week, we come together and discuss and talk about what we've learned. So my kids will come and will retrieve. So I may say, hey, I want you all to share 2 things that you've learned from your readings last week, because we're reviewing what we have learned. So our history discussion is on Monday. So we are discussing what they learned last week. So it could be 2 things. If you have older kids, it could be, all right, I want you all to share or read your written narration that you did last week. You could have everyone stop and do a brain dump. I want you to write out everything that you've learned about the Revolutionary War so far. So that's what we do for our discussions. Instead of me doing a lesson, 2 or 3 times a week for history for each child, and I'm going to have to prepare, this child has to learn this time period in history, and this child has to learn this time period, and I have to prepare a lesson for, 2 or 3 days a week for history and geography and science, and it would literally burn me out so quickly. And I know there are homeschool moms who do this, and they burn out so quickly. The secret to making it easier, simpler, and to prevent you from burning out is to do family style learning with content-based subjects. So I'm going to get down from my soapbox now, and let's get into how to teach these subjects. Now, just as a reminder, I have all of this written down in blog posts for each subject as well as videos. So if you're like, I want to learn more about history, geography, music, drawing, I have those videos on my YouTube channel, as well as blog posts, so you can read them and get the links for those. As well, I go more in depth in my Patreon. I have recorded videos of me and my kids doing actual lessons. They can get kind of interesting with 4 boys, but those are there for you to see what does this actually look like in application in a real lesson with real kids. And I keep that in my Patreon, so it's a little bit more private. I like to keep my kids' faces and things as private as possible from my YouTube channel, and so I do have that in Patreon. So if you're interested in seeing that, that's an option, and also helps support my channel and my work here, so I can keep as much of it free and the most essentials available to you. So let's start with our Monday. So we have scriptures every day. Now, we have our floor goal is to just read 1 scripture a day and quickly discuss it. So we'll read 1 scripture at least, but sometimes we'll read more. So I use Come Follow Me, which is available through our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they have wonderful lesson plans, not very structured as far as like say this and then do this, but it'll have a scripture, and then it might have some questions or some narration prompts. So we'll usually use that. But sometimes we'll read just 1 or 2 verses, and then we'll do something that I really like to do with my kids, and that's everyone thinks of a question and asks someone to their right. And then that person answers that question, the person to the right answers it, and then they ask a question to the person to the right of them. And so we go in a circle. Everyone has a chance to ask a question about the verses we read and to answer one. And it's really, really good because it's open-ended. The little kids are going to ask questions like, what was this parable about? Or what were the things in the parable that Jesus talked about? But then it could also be more, you're going to get more advanced questions from the older kids and adults. Like, how does this parable apply to you personally? So it's really awesome activity for a family to do. It gets people thinking, and it gets them asking questions and formulating their own. That's one thing you can do. You can do it as simple as reading a verse and asking your kids, can you tell me that back in your own words? Or even just, I want everyone to think how this applies to them. So we read scriptures every day, and then we sing a hymn or a folk song. When we do our hymns and folk songs, we do one where we're learning, and then we will review one. Now, sometimes we don't get our folk song sung because my boys honestly don't enjoy singing that much. I invite them, strongly encourage them to sing with us. My husband and I are usually the only ones singing, and we hear some mumbling in the background. That's okay. I try not to make it a forced thing. I try not to make it a miserable thing for them, but I do say, you guys at least follow along with the words, because the words of hymns are beautiful. Folk songs are fun. They do enjoy the folk songs more, and I should make sure we do it every day. But reviewing and singing a new hymn and folk song can sometimes be just too much. And so our floor goal is to sing 1 hymn a day. What we do is we usually learn the words first. The hymns especially are beautiful poems, so we'll learn the words. Maybe for a couple days, we'll just go through the lyrics of the hymn or the folk song. And then I'll introduce just 1 verse. So we'll just do 1 verse this week, and then when we have that down, then the next week we'll learn the next verse. So we'll sing the first verse, then the second verse, and then the third week we'll sing the first, second, and then we'll learn the third verse. And usually they're about 4 verses, and so it takes about a month to learn a hymn, sometimes longer, and then we review one. Just randomly. I have a list of the hymns that we've learned, so I can just kind of pick one, just so that we're continually retrieving that knowledge. Now on Monday, we have our history discussion, and I talked a little bit about it earlier in this video, but I bring everyone together. They're going to tell me what they've learned from their books. Sometimes I'll have a narration prompt, like, okay, you've all read about George Washington. I want you to tell me 2 things that you've learned about him. Or I want you to tell me about a battle that you've learned about from the Revolutionary War. Or we just recently did World War II. Okay, can you guys tell me what D-Day was? Can you tell me what events led up to the World War II? And so I ask them some of these things. Everyone can contribute in some way, and it's really fun because since we're reading different books, the boys will tell me different stories, and they're all having so much fun sharing. Sometimes I'll have a writing prompt for my older kids. I like to use the writing revolution prompts, like the because, but, so. For example, Hitler
put Jews in concentration camps because he put them in concentration camps, but, and then a so they can fill that out. I usually write it on the board, and then they'll use a paper and they'll just fill out those, make 3 sentences based on those. So that's just an example of what we do as a family for our history discussion. On Tuesday, we have, again, scriptures and singing, which we do every day, and then recitation, which I forgot to mention for Monday. We do recitation every day. Recitation, and here's my little box that I made for this. And this is something that I got from Simply Charlotte Mason. It's just an idea. And this is our little treasure box, because reciting poetry and scriptures, even quotes from like Shakespeare, famous quotes from speeches sometimes, these are treasures. And so what you could do is just get a box like this. We've had it for a long time and it's dirty, but we keep this on our table or close by, and we recite every day. And you could have your kids decorate this like a treasure box if you wanted. My boys have no interest in bedazzling things, so they're fine with the plain wooden treasure box. But this is our treasure box, and this is how we rotate. So we have one poem or scripture we're learning, and we recite it every day. Right now is There's No Forget Like a Book by Emily Dickinson. And then we have ones that we have learned in the past. So this one is from our scriptures, and this one we recite on Monday. I don't know if you can see this super well. I'll try to make it easy. So we have Monday, and we have every day of the week, Tuesday, and then we have every day of the month. So if it's Monday, we recite the poem or scripture behind the Monday. And then if it's the 6th day of the month, then we recite the poem or scripture behind the number 6. And this just helps us keep things in our memory to retrieve, like I talked about. And it just makes it a little bit more systematic, and we don't forget to retrieve things like poems that are really long that the boys don't want to do. We have to do the ones that are kind of assigned to us. So we do recitation every day as a family. The boys are free to pick poems or things to recite on their own, but I noticed they weren't picking anything. So I said, all right, we're going to do it as a family. And I picked the most beautiful poetry, the most important scriptures, and those are the ones we memorize or recite as a family. Now, we don't have to memorize it, but we do recite it. My husband likes them to actually memorize them, and so he has kind of some incentives for them if they memorize them and can come pass them off. But reciting is just really thinking about the beautiful words behind it. We look up the words if we don't know them, and then we think about the emotion. Now, here's a trick if your kids don't want to recite or they're tired of it. I like to have them recite in different voices. So we do a British accent, we'll do a cowboy accent, we'll do a Southern accent. Now, it may be kind of irreverent for scriptures, but my boys love it. And I think that it is actually really good for them to think about, how would someone say this? You could get really into it and do an Irish accent or whatever it is, a New York accent. Just letting them have fun and think about how this would be said, even the emotion when they get older, to like, how do you think this poet wanted this to be recited? We sometimes will also listen to the poems being recited on by a famous person on YouTube before we begin our own recitation of that poem. So just some ideas on how to do recitation, and I have a whole blog post about it. You don't have to write this down or remember it. You can go to the blog post. I'll have all of those blog posts for these subjects listed in the description box below. All right, so recitation, and then Tuesday is poetry. So we come together and we share poems that we have read and that we've really enjoyed. And then we might have a poet that we're studying as a family, so we'll read a poem from that poet. So if it's Emily Dickinson, I have a lot of poems from her. Ambleside Online is a great resource for that. I have a friend, Becky Pitcher, who put together one, and she gave it to me. She loves poetry. She did a great job and picked 40 poems by quite a few poets. And so we'll use that, but you could just get a book by that poet. You could look online. You could even ask ChatGPT, what are the 10 best poems by this poet? So reading a poem each Tuesday. We sometimes have poetry tea time where we'll make scones and we'll have hibiscus tea and we'll sit and we'll share the poems that we've read, or we'll just read a poem by this one poet, and that's really fun. Oh, and there's also some books, it's poetry for kids, and there's a whole series, and they pick some of the best poems by the best poets, and then they have illustrations to go with those poems. Those are beautiful. We use those a lot for our family poetry tea time. So then we come to Wednesday, and Wednesday, again, we do the daily things, which is scriptures, singing, recitation, but this time we do artist study. Now, artist study, it may seem kind of daunting. It is so simple. The hardest thing is just remembering to do it and to get the paintings printed. So I get these printed at Office Depot or Staples, just on cover matte photo paper, or not photo, cover photo cardstock. Cover cardstock matte. There we go. So I print them from there. You could print them at home, but I've just noticed that home printers just don't do as good of a job. And so to me, it's worth paying $10, $11 to get 6 paintings printed at Office Depot. So this one is Monet that we just studied. And as you can see, they're pretty heavy duty. I just print one and we all look at it. Once a week, we have a painting by an artist. Now I pick one artist per term. A term is 12 weeks. And I have 6 paintings from that artist. So we are looking at a painting one week and really studying it. Now I asked my boys to just look at it. Look at the colors, look at the shapes, look at the lines, kind of get a feeling for this painting. What do you think the artist was feeling when they made it? Why do you think they chose this scene? And then I asked them to just notice everything in it, because when they're done, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to have them describe it to me. So I say, okay, pretend I'm a blind person, or pretend that you saw this at a museum and you come home and you want to tell me about it. How would you describe it? So they're going to describe it to me. Another fun game that my boys like to play is to look for little details that maybe no one else noticed. So how many people were on the boat, or what color was this window, or her coat, or whatever. They like to play that with themselves. I don't require it. They don't have to memorize. What I like them to do, the whole purpose of this is for them to be able to close their eyes and to see the painting in their mind's eye. And the other reason is for them to really get an idea for this painter's style, and even for this time period, if it was Impressionism, to get an idea of Impressionism. So that is the first week of studying that painting. And then the next week, I will have my boys look at it again, really get an eye for it, and then they can draw a recreation of it. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. I have them look at it and look at the shapes and the lines, and then just sketch in the shapes and the lines. My oldest son really likes to draw a real detailed recreation of this painting from his memory, but my other ones, they just draw the lines. So I'll give you an example here. If we're studying this one, I'd say, oh, this is just kind of a box shape, and then there's some lines here, and you can kind of see there's some lines here, and maybe some kind of oval shapes. So just putting in the shapes and the lines to kind of get it in their memory. And that's what we do the second week. So that's artist study. 6 paintings per term. So you're doing 3 artists a year, and you're just doing 6 paintings. Now you're probably wondering, where do I get all this? Like, how do I know what to study for the artists and which paintings? I have a complete 12-year rotation of artists and composers and recitation. It's 55 pages and it's free. I have it, I will put it in the description box below if you want to download it, but all you have to do is print that off and you are set for 12 years for all of these family gather subjects. It even has different history topics. So, history time periods, for those years. It's so easy. It'll get you started right away. So don't forget that is in the description box below. It's free. You can download it, and it has the artists and the paintings to study. So that is artist study. Then We do a nature walk and an object lesson in the afternoon on Wednesday. So nature walk, we just go on a walk at a park or a state park, and we just notice, what plants do we see? Let's look them up on our Seek app. Let's listen for birds. Let's see if we can identify any birds or insects or trees or flowers. Let's see what's going on seasonally and find native flowers and plants. Now, if we find something interesting, I will pull out my Handbook of Nature Study by Anna Comstock and try to do an object lesson based on what we're studying for our special study topic for nature. Maybe it's going to be flowers. So I'll bring my flower book and we'll kind of look at the flowers in depth. So that's just how we do our nature study. It can be so simple, but it gets us out exploring, getting exercise, and appreciating God's creations. Then on Thursday, we have our daily things. In addition to those, we have our geography discussion. So I pick a continent each year. Now, since there's 7 continents, it's hard to fit 7 into 12 because we do a 12-year rotation. We do 6 years, and the last year we do Antarctica, Arctic, and Australia. So those are all together in 1 year. But usually we just pick one continent. This upcoming year we're doing Africa. And so the kids will be either reading books or we'll be watching documentaries as a family, and we'll come together and discuss what we've learned. And maybe we have a big piece of a big notepad, or I guess sketch pad, that we draw a map of different countries. And so we might get that out and sketch what we've learned from our documentary, like adding rivers to this map of Ethiopia or Australia, adding mountain ranges that we learned about in the documentary. So that's just our geography discussion, kind of for the most part, looking at maps or making our own maps. Or during that time, you could be watching 15 to 20 minutes of a documentary together as a family. On Thursday, we also have composer study, which is a lot like artist study, which is simply, instead of looking at the paintings, we are listening to songs by a composer that I chose for that term. Now, again, the only thing you really need to do is just make a playlist, either on Spotify or YouTube or whatever you want. You could get CDs from the library for that composer and just listen to a song. I give my boys some Play-Doh. We will actually listen to it while we eat because my boys are very contemplative while they're eating. It's really good time for them to be quiet. And so we'll listen to it in the morning, and I just ask them to listen for instruments. Sometimes if I'm feeling on top of things, I might say, oh, this song has a piccolo, or this song has drums or cymbals, and I'll have them listen to that instrument on their own, like on YouTube, just like you can just search violin playing or cymbals or whatever, a solo of that instrument, and let them listen to it, and then ask them, okay, can you pick out those instruments or that instrument in this song? Also just asking them to listen to it and how does it make them feel? Ask them, how does it make them feel? Does it make them feel sad? Does it make them feel happy, uplifting, angry? What do you think the composer is trying to make you feel or think while you're listening to this? So we do it 2 weeks in a row for one song, just like we did with artist study. So 6 songs for the term. So for composer study, it's just like artist study, where you pick one composer for a 12-week term, and then you have 6 of their songs that you're going to study for that term, and you study it for 2 weeks. So on Thursday, we listen to it. It's like 10 minutes. And then the next week, we listen to it again. And you could also have the whole playlist for that artist to listen to while you're doing art, while you're doing a handicraft, while you're in the car. I like to play it just as a relaxing thing. Or if it's not relaxing, it could be while we're cleaning or doing something else to just get those beautiful melodies in their mind. So on Friday, we have our writing and our literature discussion, or literature discussion and a writing lesson. So we have a read aloud book that we read as a family every day. You could read it in the morning as kind of an incentive for people to come down from bed, because we're going to start reading our read aloud book. You could read it while someone could read it, either you or your husband, while the other person's making breakfast. It could be at lunchtime when you're eating lunch together. Sometimes we have our read aloud then. You could have it at bedtime. Now, I pick books based on not if they're just a classic, but anything that is the best literature that humankind has to offer. I try to pick a mixture of modern fiction. It could be historical fiction. It could be a biography. Anything that is just really good, that appeals to all ages. Things that I hope that my children grow up and if someone asks, well, have you read this book? They're like, yes, because it is just one of the best books that we have. So those are the books we're reading. And I will read it every day. It could be a couple pages. It could be a whole chapter. It just depends on how much we're able to get through that day. And then at the end of the week, we have a discussion. And this is again where we come and we retrieve. So my boys are going to tell me, what they remember from this week and what happened in this chapter or chapters. And then we'll have a writing lesson. Now, I will pick a sentence or up to a paragraph from the book that we're reading. Now, I like to pick sentences based on if it has interesting language or words, if it has a sentence structure that we're going to learn about, like subordinating conjunctions or positives, or if it just has literary devices like a metaphor, a simile, personification. I have a list of those in my teaching book, and so as I'm reading aloud to them, I just mark them like, ooh, that's a good sentence. And my boys will use that for copy work or dictation through the week. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. I talk about it in my language arts video, but I'm also going to talk about it in the next week when I talk about skill-based subjects, what copy work and dictation is. So we'll use one of these sentences, these really beautiful, well-written sentences, and we will kind of study it in our writing lesson. And then my older son will try to imitate that. And my other boys will just talk about, okay, where's the verb? Where's a noun? Where's the subject? For the boys that are at that level. So here's an example of one of the sentences. Its door hung sadly from a broken hinge. Its porch floorboards were rotted, and its one-room interior was densely occupied by rats, spiders, and other field creatures. Now, I mark this one because, number one, it has beautiful imagery. The door hung sadly. And then it also has semicolons. So the kids, when they copied it down, they're learning, oh, this is how you use a semicolon. Now, we may not go over the rules, which you could go over the rules for semicolon, but just copying things down, these sentences that have grammar and punctuation written correctly and used correctly, and interestingly, they're absorbing it as they write it down. And then it has lists. It has a list with commas, rats, spiders, and other field creatures. So for my younger kids, they're getting some idea of punctuation by copying that down. So I just mark them as we read. I don't go through and read it beforehand, which you could do, but I don't have time. I will just mark sentences down as we read it, and at the end of the week, then they will use those sentences for either sentence imitation. We'll kind of study that sentence for the younger kids and look at the punctuation and spelling and new words that they don't know. And so that is how I do all of those subjects together as a family. Now, in my atmosphere video, I talked about interleaving, and I just want to mention that a little bit more with the artist study and composer study. So I showed you these two paintings by Monet. Now, we studied 3 Impressionist artists this year. So something that you can do at the end of the year or throughout the year if you want is get all of those together, the 18 Impressionist paintings, and you can have your child look at it and tell you, okay, do you think this is a Monet or a Van Gogh or a Degas? And they're going to tell you, and you can tell them, oh, no, that's a Monet, and put it in that pile. You could also ask them to sort it. You could say, okay, look at all these paintings. Can you put all the Monet paintings in a pile? Can you put all the Degas or all the Van Gogh? And because you've been studying them throughout the year, they're going to have a good idea of this is Monet. And then later, when you're in a museum or they see something, sometimes a lot of these classic paintings are used in advertising or in movies. They're going to be so excited. It's like seeing an old friend. Now you're using that interleaving. You're taking things that are similar and putting them together and having your child differentiate. So that is how I use interleaving for our family gather subjects. You can also do that with music if you want. It's a little bit harder, especially as the songs are like, 10 to 15 minutes long, but you could do little clips from certain music and ask, okay, was that a Beethoven or was that a Mozart? And have them do it that way. If your kids like to play games, they will probably enjoy doing that. And it's a super simple thing to do, especially since the paintings are already printed out and you can have them just out on the floor and have your kids play a game in that way, and also be learning how to identify and discriminate between different artists and different styles. So that is all I have for you today for Family Gather. Do not forget to download that Family Gather 12-year rotation that I have for you. I literally spent months making it for my own family and to just save me time. And I'm offering it to you guys because I know it's going to be so helpful for you as you plan your own family gather time, which is what the homework assignment is for you today. Today, or this week, I want you to go through and pick the subject you're going to do as a family. I highly recommend doing scriptures, highly recommend doing some type of singing, hymns and or folk songs, and then really try to do the artist study and the composer study. And so that is your homework assignment for now. And check in next week. I'm going to talk about the different skill-based subjects that kids will do individually during their individual learning time. And I'll talk about how to pick out a curriculum for those. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. You can also subscribe to my email list where I will just send the newest videos and blog posts straight to your inbox if you're interested in that. And that will be in the description box.